she cheated. I signed the divorce papers without flinching, leaving her to panic, but the silence I left behind was the real betrayal that shattered her world. I found the papers before she even said a word, neatly stacked on the kitchen table, right between my coffee mug and the half-sliced avocado she knew I hated. That was Rebecca's style, precision with a hint of passive aggression. She walked in, still drying her hands on a dish towel, and didn't even look up when she said it. I want a divorce. Not we need to talk, not I've been unhappy, just that, like she was canceling a subscription. I took a long sip from my mug, stared at the papers like they were the morning crossword, and said without blinking, "That sounds good, Rebecca." No sarcasm, just warm, soft, like I was agreeing to lunch plans. I didn't even flinch. I think that's when she started to panic, though she covered it like a pro. She raised an eyebrow, probably expecting the usual denial, bargaining, maybe a grand speech about soulmates and therapy. Instead, I handed her the pen. Should I sign all pages or just the bottom one? That's when she finally looked up, her lips parted just slightly, confused, disoriented, like someone hit the brakes in her fantasy. "You're not even going to ask why?" I leaned back in my chair. Nope, truth is, I already knew. Not the details yet, but the rhythm was off for months. I'd felt the hum of something rotten beneath our quiet routines, the perfume that wasn't hers, the credit card. Charge at the hotel that didn't match her itinerary, the unfamiliar cologne buried deep in the laundry bin behind her yoga pants. Tiny things, easy to miss, but I don't miss things. I collect them. So, no, I didn't ask why. I signed page after page with the same steady hand I used to balance our budget. When I was done, I closed the folder and pushed it back to her, like I was done with a menu. She stood there a moment longer, disarmed, then forced a nod. Well, okay then. She turned and walked out of the kitchen, like she'd won something. She had no idea I just let her step into a trap she'd built for herself, and I wasn't going to stop her. Rebecca always needed an audience. That's not bitterness talking, it's just biology at this point. So I wasn't surprised when, exactly 3 days after I signed the divorce papers, she staged her little woe-is-me brunch with her inner circle, Amanda, the forever divorced wine snob, Kelly, who couldn't keep a secret if it was tattooed inside her eyelids, and Heather, her oldest friend, and possibly the only one in the room who still remembered what Rebecca looked like before the Botox and filtered Instagram reels. They met at that ridiculous place downtown with the overpriced beet salad and fake rustic furniture. I only knew because Amanda posted the Mimosa Tower on her story, like a crime scene. I watched it silently while folding my gym clothes into duffel bags, smiling at how quickly Rebecca had transitioned from wife to narrative. She leaned in dramatically, oversized sunglasses perched like armor on her face, and said with just the right amount of tremble, "He didn't even try to save our marriage. 19 years, and he just smiled, signed, walked away." Amanda clutched her chest, like someone had flatlined mid-mimosa. "Are you serious? He didn't say anything?" Rebecca shook her head slowly, milking it. Not one question, not even why. It's like I was a stranger. Kelly predictably went full Lifetime movie. That's sociopathic, Bex, like stone cold. Who does that? Heather didn't say much, just stirred her straw through the melting ice in her glass, squinting a little tighter than usual. I'd always suspected Heather had a brain under all that curated neutrality, and from the way she tilted her head when Rebecca kept talking, I could tell she smelled something burning beneath all the theatrics. Because here's the thing, Rebecca didn't expect sympathy as a currency, and she just tried to cash in too early. Divorce is messy, loud, painful, but when the man you left doesn't kick or scream or beg to stay, when he just disappears like fog under the sun, people get curious. Whispers start. Maybe it wasn't that simple. Maybe there's more. Meanwhile, I was in the middle of my own quiet exodus. No announcements, no dramatic exits, just cold, deliberate movement. I didn't take everything, just what was mine, things I bought, things I earned, things with meaning. I left the fake antique mirror she claimed was us. I left the book she never read, the Le Creuset pot we got as a wedding gift and used twice. But I took the handwritten note she once left in my briefcase on our 3rd anniversary, before her eyes started drifting toward other people's reflections. I kept it, not out of sentiment, but because it might come in handy later. Rebecca watched the house get emptier each day, like she was watching an hourglass she hadn't noticed was flipped. Every time she came home from yoga or her casual networking dinners, another closet would echo. And still, no message, no confrontation, no let's talk. She thought I'd fall apart without her orbiting me. She hadn't realized I'd already broken free of her gravity. By the end of week 2, I was gone. No argument, no grand farewell, no teary voicemail with sad piano music in the background, just absence, complete and surgical. I changed my number, deleted my social media, rerouted my mail to a private mailbox that didn't even bear my name. The utilities on the house, her house now, were quietly transferred to her account. Even my Spotify stopped syncing to the kitchen speakers. It was like I'd been erased, pixel by pixel, from the digital painting of our marriage. And that's what really got to her, not the divorce, not even the silence, but the invisibility. She expected heartbreak, rage, drunk texts at 2 a.m, maybe a dramatic call to one of her friends begging to talk. But what she got was nothing. And that kind of quiet? It's not peace, it's power. I moved into a sleek apartment across the lake in Bellevue, top floor, minimal furniture, just how I like it. The kind of place where the doors close with a satisfying hush, where nobody knows your name and nobody cares. The concierge knew better than to give out unit numbers, especially to frantic women in Lululemon leggings claiming, "I'm his wife." She tried. Oh, I know she tried. She called my office, apparently, only to learn I'd gone fully remote and taken a new consulting contract through a different firm. She messaged my old gym buddies, but most of them weren't real friends, just spotters and grunters who knew me as Dan. She even reached out to my mother, which had to be a last resort because Rebecca hated her. My mom told her, and I quote, "Maybe if you'd loved him as much as you love your Pilates instructor, he'd have stayed in touch." That must have stung. Rebecca, in her prime, ran social circles like a chessboard. She always needed to control the narrative, and she had a way of bending perception, always the victim, always the misunderstood one. But it's hard to steer a story when the other character simply walks out of the plot. She started texting. "Hey, just wondering if we can maybe talk. I feel like this is all happening too fast." Nothing. "Can we at least agree on what we're telling people? It's confusing for the kids, for our friends. Still nothing." We didn't have kids, but I guess she thought throwing the word in would sting. Then came the email, subject line, "Closure." I didn't open it, just archived it. There's a special kind of power in not reacting. It's not revenge, it's discipline. I could imagine her pacing through the house, opening drawers, checking the closet again, wondering if I'd left anything. A note, a post-it, even a pair of socks she could toss dramatically to the floor. But there was nothing, not even my scent. That's when the silence started whispering to her, because silence has a way of twisting into something louder than screams. It starts to make you question your version of events. It starts to eat at the edges of your memory. And that's exactly where I wanted her. Not angry, not heartbroken, unsettled. Heather didn't bring it up right away. She waited. That was her style, let things simmer, but eventually, curiosity got the better of her, or maybe she just wanted to watch Rebecca squirm. It was during a lazy Saturday lunch, Rebecca halfway through a kale Caesar and 2 glasses deep into a crisp Chardonnay, when Heather casually stirred her straw and said, "So, I think I saw Daniel last week." Rebecca froze her fork, paused mid-step where Heather shrugged, slow and deliberate. "Canless." Rebecca snorted. "Please, Daniel hates places like that. The man thinks anything with a sommelier is a scam, right?" Heather's eyes narrowed. "That's what I thought too, but it was him. Black button-down, new watch. Looked good, actually. Better than I've ever seen him." Rebecca tried to laugh, but it caught awkwardly in her throat. Was he alone? That's when Heather hesitated, and Rebecca felt it, that slight tilt in the air, the moment just before you learn something you're not ready to hear. "No," Heather said softly. "He was with someone." Rebecca leaned back in her chair too fast, her wine sloshing. "Who was she?" "I don't know. Stunning. That quiet, expensive kind of stunning. Long, dark hair, navy dress, pearl earrings." They were tucked into the corner booth, drinking red wine, laughing. "Laughing?" Rebecca echoed, voice brittle. Heather nodded, and she touched his wrist when he stood up like it was normal. Rebecca's lips tightened. "You must be mistaken. Daniel's not the type to—" "I wasn't mistaken." Heather reached into her bag, like she was fishing for gum, and instead pulled out her phone. A few taps later, she angled the screen across the table, her voice apologetic but firm. "I wasn't going to show you this, but I figured you should see." Rebecca stared at the photo. It wasn't staged, it wasn't clear, but there he was, Daniel in profile, smiling in a way she hadn't seen in years. There was something in his posture, too, shoulders relaxed, chin tilted just slightly, like he was actually present, alive. The woman across from him had her hand on his wrist, and even in the grainy image, you could tell she wasn't trying to impress him. She already had. Rebecca's face didn't change, not at first. She handed the phone back with the same grace she used to fake orgasms, controlled and indifferent. But Heather watched her eyes, not her mouth, and Rebecca's eyes had just flinched. "He didn't even tell me he was seeing someone," Rebecca muttered, stirring her now warm wine. "You're divorced," Heather said gently. "He doesn't have to." Rebecca didn't respond. She just stared past Heather, through the window, to the couple walking their golden retriever across the street. They looked so nauseatingly peaceful. Inside her, something began to crack. Not quite pain, not sadness either, but something sourer, older, a flavor she'd denied herself for years, jealousy. And she hated it, because Daniel was never supposed to be the one to leave with Grace. He was supposed to fade into beige, maybe date someone painfully average, gain 10 pounds, and start talking about craft beer and lawn care. But this, high-end restaurants, expensive watches, elegant women who touched his wrist like it meant something, that wasn't the script she'd written. And for the first time, it hit her. Maybe she didn't know Daniel at all, or worse, maybe she never did. She told herself it was just a detour. It started innocently. Rebecca left her book club early, bored out of her mind by yet another discussion about emotional labor and rediscovering midlife purpose. She plugged in a random podcast and drove no destination, just movement. But somehow the tires knew before her mind did. 30 minutes later, she was turning onto a quiet, tree-lined street in Bellevue, slowing down in front of a sleek glass and steel high-rise with minimalist signage that whispered wealth, the Perch. She hated how pretentious the name sounded, and she hated even more how the valet didn't even glance at her Lexus as she pulled up across the street and killed the engine. For a while she just sat there, pretending to scroll through her phone, but her eyes kept drifting upward to the 8th floor, where golden light softened against navy curtains, casting gentle glows on the floor-to-ceiling windows. Then she saw them, silhouettes. 2 of them. One was unmistakably Daniel, broad shoulders, hands in his pockets, pacing slowly the way he used to when thinking through problems. And the other? The woman from the photo, probably, hair tied up in an elegant twist, wine glass in one hand, posture impeccable even in shadow. Rebecca stared, frozen. The woman turned slightly, just enough to lean into Daniel's space as he spoke, her head tilting back in a laugh Rebecca hadn't heard in their home in over a decade. That's when the nausea kicked in, because it wasn't just that he had moved on. It was that there was grace in that room, intimacy, the kind that doesn't come from flings or petty revenge, the kind that roots itself quietly, like a tree that was planted before you even realized there was soil. Rebecca found herself hunched forward in her seat, breathing through her nose, hand gripping the steering wheel with fingers gone white. Who the hell was she? The wine glass, the gesture, the way she carried herself. She wasn't just some young office assistant or yoga instructor looking for a divorced man with a good 401k. No, this woman had presence. She didn't need to take up space. She owned it just by standing there. Rebecca adjusted the mirror and caught her own reflection. Tired eyes, makeup smudged from the day, lipstick faded, roots showing under her balayage, and her blouse, once sharp and tailored, now sagged a little from the seatbelt crease. It hit her then, like a slow, mean trick. She no longer looked like the woman Daniel would choose. Not now, not against her. She stayed there for almost 20 minutes, watching shadows move through that glowing room, watching Daniel refill wine, pull a chair out, laugh again. And not once did he look toward the window. He didn't know she was there, but worse, he didn't care. She made it 3 more days before caving. 3 days of half-sleeping with her phone clutched in hand, pretending to herself that she didn't care, that she wasn't obsessively checking for updates on Daniel's LinkedIn, scouring tagged photos, Googling floor plans for the Perch to guess which unit faced the lake. 3 days of trying to carry on her carefully curated life, Pilates, skincare, networking lunches, while the silence stretched like a tight rubber band pulling at her sanity. So she did what she swore she wouldn't. At 11:42 p.m., with her robes cinched too tightly and her Chardonnay glass sweating on the marble nightstand, she opened their old text thread, the one still pinned to the top of her messages, and typed, "Daniel, can we talk?" She hovered over the screen, read it 6 times, deleted the question mark, put it back. Her thumb shook when she hit send. The typing indicator didn't appear for almost 5 minutes, and she nearly convinced herself he wouldn't answer at all. Then it came. "Daniel, what's left to discuss?" No punctuation, no warmth, just flat, cool dismissal. Rebecca stared at the screen as the weight in her chest turned to concrete. She read it again, hoping it might somehow morph into something more generous, but it didn't. It just sat there. What's left to discuss? It wasn't cruelty, that's what made it worse. It was indifference. She had braced for anger, for a snarky jab, even a guilt trip, but this sterile surgical detachment was like trying to scream in a vacuum. She couldn't even weaponize it. There was no thread to pull, no emotion to exploit, just a wall. She didn't reply. There was nothing she could say that wouldn't feel pathetic. Instead, she stared at their message history. 19 years of shared life reduced to this barren digital thread. Trips planned, groceries listed. Jokes, emojis, midnight I love US, all leading up to that final line, what's left to discuss. For the first time, she realized the conversation had ended long before the divorce. She just hadn't noticed. Daniel had stopped speaking long ago. She just filled the silence with her own voice, convinced it was a dialogue. She turned her phone face down, but the glow still bled through the fabric of the pillow. Rebecca lay there in the dark, breath shallow, eyes open, and outside, somewhere across the lake, a window glowed warm against the deep blue, but it wasn't hers anymore. It was raining, the way Seattle rains when the city wants to shame you. Quiet, constant, like it's whispering all your worst decisions back at you. Rebecca sat in her car outside the perch for a full 11 minutes, engine running, wipers ticking a slow, anxious rhythm. She wasn't wearing makeup, her hair up in a lazy bun, no armor, no script, just impulse and desperation. She told herself it wasn't a big deal. She just wanted to talk, just to clear the air, maybe salvage something. But as she stepped under the awning, soaked and breathless, she realized she hadn't thought past the lobby. The concierge barely looked up. "Name, Rebecca Alden," she said, almost daring him to react. "I'm here to see Daniel Alden." The pause was everything, a soft, polite delay, like the air being sucked out of a room. He tapped a few keys. "Mr. Alden didn't note any visitors tonight. I'm his wife." The man glanced up now, his face unreadable. She caught a flicker of something in his expression. Not judgment exactly, just that faint trace of recognition people get when they realize they're looking at someone who's already lost. "I'll ring up." A long pause followed, the kind that makes your skin crawl. She imagined Daniel standing in his minimalist living room, maybe barefoot, maybe holding a glass of something expensive, seeing her name flash on the screen. She pictured him exhaling slowly, weighing something invisible in his palm. Then he said, "You can come up, elevator 3, penthouse level." Her heart slammed into her ribs. The ride up felt longer than it was. The elevator was silent except for the rain sliding down the glass walls as Bellevue glittered below her. She caught a reflection, dripping wet, eyes wide, face pale. For a second, she didn't even recognize herself. She stepped out into a hallway that looked more like an art gallery than a residence. Warm wood, soft lights, silence so thick it muffled her thoughts. His door was already cracked open. She pushed it. The scent hit her first, not Daniel's cologne, not his aftershave, but something richer, amber, sandalwood, a faint hint of wine. Music played low in the background, Chet Baker, lazy and perfect, and there he was. Daniel stood near the open kitchen, back turned, pouring a glass of red. He didn't look surprised, didn't move toward her, just glanced over his shoulder and said, "You're wet." She stepped in, unsure if she was even welcome. "It's raining." Daniel handed her a towel, not warm, not cold, just dry. That small gesture wrecked her more than yelling ever could. She looked around. The place was beautiful, understated, intentional. Every object had a place, nothing extra, no clutter, including her. She opened her mouth to speak, but her voice caught when she saw it. The faint reflection in the glass balcony door, a woman's silhouette sitting on the couch, just out of view. One leg crossed elegantly over the other, a book in hand. Rebecca froze. Daniel noticed. "We were just about to eat." It wasn't said cruelly, it wasn't performative, just honest. Rebecca stood in his hallway, soaked, small, and suddenly very aware of every choice she'd made in the last year. Her hand clenched the towel like it was a life vest. Daniel turned back to his wine, and for a second, she saw something terrifying in his face. Peace. He had truly moved on, and she had just walked into a life that no longer had a Rebecca-shaped space. She took 2 hesitant steps into the living room, unsure whether to follow the tension or run from it. Her heels tapped softly against the polished floor, and every click sounded like a mistake. The apartment was dim, but the kind of dim that spoke of intention, warm lighting, amber shadows, soft jazz whispering through the air. And then she saw her. The woman was perched on the edge of the slate-gray sofa, legs crossed like a ballerina on break, her dress fluid and perfectly unwrinkled despite sitting. She held a crystal glass of red wine in one hand, her other hand resting gently against the side of her face as she turned to regard Rebecca with polite, detached curiosity. There was something familiar about her. Cheekbones that defied age, that quiet confidence that money can't buy and yoga can't fake. Rebecca's stomach flipped, but her brain couldn't place it. A distant memory flickered, just out of reach. Daniel stepped between them, calm as a surgeon. He poured a second glass of wine with the same deliberate grace he used to fix cabinet hinges, steady, patient, utterly unbothered. He offered it to the woman, not to Rebecca, then, with a glance at Rebecca, said, "Sorry, we already started." 4 words, not hostile, not mocking, just firm, final, like she was interrupting a meeting, like she had wandered into someone else's dinner party by mistake. Rebecca opened her mouth but couldn't summon a sentence. She was still trying to decode the woman's face, still trying to understand why something in her brain screamed, "I know you," while everything else inside her screamed, "Get out." Daniel sat beside the woman with natural familiarity. He didn't put his arm around her, he didn't have to. The intimacy was in the space between them, measured, quiet, well-practiced. This wasn't new, this wasn't a rebound, this was real. Rebecca suddenly felt her wet clothes clinging to her body like a costume, her hair frizzing out at the edges, mascara smudged beneath her eyes. She looked like the past, like a ghost who hadn't realized she was already dead. She turned to Daniel, reaching for anything, even sarcasm. "You don't waste time." He sipped his wine. "You did." The woman raised an eyebrow at that, amused, not cruel, just interested, like she was watching a play with unexpected dialogue. Rebecca's throat burned. I thought maybe we could talk," she said, softer now, aware of how small her voice had become. Daniel set his glass down. "I thought we did. The day you handed me the papers." Humiliation flushed her neck, crawling up behind her ears like fire. There was no yelling, no accusations, just this unbearable poise. He wasn't punishing her, he had already dismissed her. The elegant woman glanced between them, then leaned toward Daniel slightly. "Do you want me to give you two a moment?" Rebecca caught it then, that voice. Something clicked. College, a dorm party, a shared major, a stupid, petty betrayal that Rebecca had written off as nothing. A girl she had called forgettable behind her back when she got too close to one of Rebecca's old flings. What was her name? Margot? Morgan? No, Monica. And suddenly, Rebecca remembered exactly who this woman was. But Daniel said nothing, and that silence told her everything. Her past had walked back into her life, and she was no longer the main character in it. Rebecca stood there, like a vase no one knew where to place. Too valuable to throw out, too awkward to display. Her voice came out thinner than she expected, laced with disbelief she hadn't even processed until now. "You've moved on already?" she asked. The question almost childish, like catching someone opening presents before Christmas. Daniel didn't sigh, didn't scoff. He just tilted his head slightly, brow relaxed as if weighing the weather. "You decided quickly," he said, swirling his wine. "I respected your choice." There was no edge in his voice. That was what made it unbearable. He wasn't trying to hurt her. He wasn't trying at all. The words just were, like facts in a textbook. Monica, because yes, now she was certain it was Monica, glanced at Daniel with quiet confusion, then turned back to Rebecca with the polite curiosity of someone realizing they've walked into a subplot. "I'm sorry," she said, voice gentle, eyes genuinely puzzled. "Who is this?" Rebecca blinked, her mouth opened, but no sound came. Her name caught on her tongue like dust on old silk. Daniel didn't rush to answer. He took another sip of wine, leaned back slightly, and said without looking at her, "This is Rebecca, my ex-wife." Monica's eyebrows rose just a little, not in shock, not in judgment, just surprise, like she'd been told someone was no longer on the guest list but hadn't expected to meet them at the door. "Oh," she said softly, "I didn't realize." Rebecca flinched. It wasn't what Monica said, it was how she said it. With grace, with honest detachment, as if her presence here was an unexpected complication in an otherwise peaceful evening. The room swallowed her. She'd come here armed with anxiety and unresolved questions, hoping... what? That he'd fight, that he'd cry, that he'd pull her aside, say this was a mistake, tell her he still thought about her when he couldn't sleep. But he was sleeping now, eating, laughing, existing without her, and worse, in front of someone who had replaced her so effortlessly it made the marriage feel imaginary. Rebecca's voice came back in a whisper. "She doesn't even know who I am." Daniel finally looked at her again, his expression unreadable. "That's not her fault." And there it was. Not anger, not cruelty, just truth. Rebecca backed up slowly, towel still in her hand, like she was clinging to proof she'd once belonged here. But she didn't. She was a footnote now, a plot twist long resolved, and all she could do was watch as Daniel turned back to Monica, resumed their dinner conversation like a page resumed after a brief crease. She'd arrived hoping to stir something, grief, guilt, longing, but she'd only confirmed the worst thing of all. She didn't matter anymore. Rebecca stood frozen in the doorway, soaked, small, unraveling thread by thread in a space that no longer made room for her shadow. Monica had turned back to her book. Daniel had returned to his wine, and the silence between them, so calm and lived in, made Rebecca feel like she was witnessing a life she'd been erased from long ago. Her voice cracked before she even realized she was speaking. "Did you?" Her throat tightened. "Did you ever truly love me?" The question came out too quiet, almost childlike, not a weapon, not a test, just raw, naked uncertainty. as if asking could rewind time or stitch something closed that had long since torn open. Daniel didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, not cruelly, not with resentment, but with remembering, and that was worse. He set his wine glass down with the kind of care you give to things you once treasured, then straightened slightly, rested one hand gently on his knee, and said, his voice low and deliberate, "I did. Deeply. Every day, even when it was hard, even when I felt small in rooms you wanted to outgrow." Rebecca blinked fast, something stinging at the corners of her eyes. Daniel continued, softer now, "Until you stopped loving us." That word, us. Not me and you, us. As if the marriage had been a third living thing in the room. Something that needed feeding, listening, tending, and she'd let it wither, watching it shrink between her and Daniel like a dying houseplant she blamed him for forgetting to water. Rebecca opened her mouth, but no apology would form, no argument, no defense. What could she even say? That she was busy? That she didn't realize she was making him feel like a burden when she told him to just get over it every time he reached out? There was no script for this, only the dull ache of a door that had been closed for so long she didn't notice it had locked. Daniel stood up, not to walk her out, just to stretch, or maybe to give her the unspoken signal that this conversation was over. He didn't look angry, he looked resolved. Monica didn't turn her head again, she just kept reading, the lamp beside her casting a golden light over her page and the edge of Daniel's shoulder, like the universe was highlighting the part of the story that mattered now. Rebecca turned slowly, towel still clutched like a forgotten apology, and walked to the door. No one followed, and no one stopped her. Daniel's words echoed behind her. Not his bitterness, not his accusation, just a verdict, and no appeal. The hallway was colder than she remembered, or maybe it was just her. Rebecca stepped out without looking back, feet numb inside heels she now regretted choosing. Her fingers lingered on the edge of the door for a second, just a second, like maybe the wood would soften, maybe the moment would stretch open and let her back in. It didn't. The door closed behind her with the softest click she'd ever heard. No slam, no bang, just finality. No footsteps followed, no voice called her name, no last-minute confession to chase after, only the whir of the elevator and the muffled sound of a jazz trumpet dissolving into the walls. She pressed the elevator button, heart thudding in that sick, uneven way that happens when your body hasn't caught up to what your mind already knows. It's done. She didn't cry, not because she didn't want to, but because there was no room left for it. The grief had dried into something quieter, shame, maybe, or regret, or just the echo of choices she made while assuming she'd always have time to fix them. As the elevator door slid open, she turned slightly, reflex, not hope, still nothing. Daniel hadn't moved, and why would he? He had already left long before she ever showed up tonight. He just happened to do it silently, elegantly, without the fireworks she used to weaponize. No yelling, no drama, just slow, deliberate distance. Like watching fog lift off a lake you didn't realize had gone still. The ride down was endless. She caught her reflection in the mirrored walls, drenched hair, runny mascara, face tight with a kind of tiredness that no skincare routine could cover. She didn't look like the woman who handed him divorce papers 5 weeks ago with a smug smile and a pre-rehearsed monologue about needing space. She looked like someone who finally understood what space really meant. Downstairs, the lobby was empty. The concierge glanced up but said nothing, just nodded once, respectfully, like someone silently closing a file. Outside, the rain hadn't stopped. Rebecca stepped into it without bothering to raise her umbrella, and up above, on the 8th floor, Daniel poured himself another glass of wine, sat back beside Monica, and exhaled. Not triumphantly, not dramatically, just completely. He didn't check his phone, didn't watch her walk away through the glass. He simply picked up the conversation where it had left off, as if nothing and no one had interrupted. The house felt louder now, not from noise but from absence. The echo of Daniel's steady footsteps no longer pacing down the hall, the silence where his cough used to drift from the other room when he was reading late. The emptiness beside her in bed was no longer a metaphor. It had weight, a shape, a void that pulled at her spine when she lay down at night and stared at the ceiling, like it might offer an answer. Rebecca scrolled endlessly, mindlessly, the blue light from her phone painting her face a tired shade of ghost, thumb swiping through feeds she barely absorbed. Influencers, sponsored ads, acquaintances with birthday cakes and puppies. Her hand moved by instinct now. Her brain was somewhere else, stuck, rewinding, haunted by phrases she couldn't unhear. You decided quickly. I respected your choice. She didn't know what she was looking for until she found it. It was tucked between a beach photo and a poorly lit plate of sushi, posted by someone she hadn't spoken to in years. Monica. The Monica. Her profile was sleek, curated, elegant. A woman who had never needed noise to draw attention. And there it was, the photo, a soft shot, golden hour. Daniel and Monica seated at an outdoor table, wine in their hands, smiling. Not posed, not performative. The kind of smile you didn't plan, the kind that came from real peace. Daniel's hand was resting casually atop hers, her nails the same soft pink they'd been in the apartment. Rebecca's breath caught in her throat, because now she remembered everything. Monica Prescott junior year study group in Professor Halpern's ethics seminar. Monica had been sharp, warm, generous, and Rebecca, drunk on the rush of always being the center of attention, had casually dismantled her, spread a few lies, flirted with the guy Monica had a real shot with. A few weeks later, Monica changed majors, switched dorms, disappeared. Rebecca hadn't thought of her since, until Monica reappeared in Daniel's life like a quiet reckoning. Rebecca clicked the photo. The caption was simple, barely a whisper. Sometimes happiness begins exactly where desperation ends. No tags, no hashtags, no heart emojis, just truth. Rebecca stared at the screen until her eyes burned, then turned it face down on the nightstand. She didn't cry, not because she wasn't broken, but because even her sorrow felt too late now. Grief belonged to something that might return. What she felt now was something colder. Finally, the house creaked around her, like it was remembering him. Every room, every wall still bore fingerprints of the man she had mistaken for permanent. And now he was someone else's future, someone who remembered, someone who forgave, someone who loved him back before it was too late. Rebecca lay back in her bed, suddenly aware of how small she felt in it. Not physically, but existentially, like the world had continued without her, and the only thing left was the hollow she made by choosing the wrong moment to stop loving. The rain whispered outside, her phone stayed dark, and for the first time since this began, she understood what she'd lost. Not just Daniel, but the version of herself that might have deserved him.